weeks ago, I declare war, and just out of curiosity, I'll shoot wake you up. So anyway, just out of curiosity, how many of you played the card game War before? All right, okay, yeah. In fact, actually, I thought I would use a volunteer just to quickly demonstrate this game. Actually, okay, yeah, Tony got it. There's no quick way of doing this game. It's a long game. For those of you who maybe have never played the card game War, just the general premise of how it works is basically you got a couple players and they separate the cards into a couple stacks, and basically they turn the card over.
Did you want to take poker?
Oh, no, you're good.
Am I good?
You're good, yeah, unless we want to be here all night. So,
Oh,
but
that's
you are ready to play. Way to go, Tony. Yeah, see. I like that. You were ready to go at this game. So Tony actually likes this game. I get the sense. So, so how War though goes basically is you flip a card over and you're trying to have a higher card than the other person, and if you do, you get their stack, and it kind of goes on. Where the game really gets exciting is if you get both have cards with the same number on there. And then you have to go, you basically take 3 cards and you go, I declare war, and you flip it over. Again, super exciting, right? And if you're trying to, again, win by getting the highest numbers, basically trying to get the entire stack of cards. That's why it takes forever to actually play this game. And it's a great game too, by the way, if you're like, not really into poker, you don't have a very good poker face, you don't have to have any card skills whatsoever to play this game. So, I mean, yeah, you don't even have to like games because it's not really even a very fun game. But anyway, I share that with you again because it kind of leads into the title of our series, I Declare War. And just to kind of give credit where credit's due, it comes from a book that I read about a year ago from a guy by the name of Levi Lesko. And I encourage you actually to go pick the book up. It's a great book. You can find it on Amazon. And he actually kind of takes a series of a few different avenues that we're taking it. But it's really a great read. Has some really good stuff in there. But when we're talking about declaring war, it's important for you to know we're not talking about picking a fight with others. In fact, this is historically is where the church has gone wrong. We have this tendency to kind of pick a fight with anyone and everyone out there, and as a result, the church has oftentimes gotten known for what we're against as opposed to what and who we're for. So we're not talking about that. We're not talking about picking a fight with somebody out there as much as we're talking about taking up the fight in here. Taking up the fight in here. Because here's the deal, and this is sort of the big premise for this series, is if I can win the battle within, I will be more equipped to win the battles out there. In fact, it was October of 2018. Sotheby's in London had a piece of framed artwork known as the Girl with the Balloon. The Girl with the Balloon. And it went up for auction. And this painting had been done by artists that at the time had gained a lot of notoriety for a lot of his street graffiti artwork on the walls and the streets of London. Which might explain why he chose to remain anonymous identity-wise and actually went by this alias of Banksy. That was his alias name, is Banksy. And so, in fact, actually, interesting enough, when it comes to his identity, even today, most people don't know actually who this guy really is. He's been able to maintain the anonymity with his identity. But it came time for one of his pieces of artwork, again, this girl with a balloon, to go up for sale. And it's pretty amazing how much money this thing started to, in terms of the auction, how much money was put on the table for this piece of artwork. In fact, when it goes all the way through the process, the final bid was 860,000 pounds, which this is the equivalent of $1.4 million for this painting. Now that's pretty significant. That would make this story pretty noteworthy in and of itself. But what makes this story so interesting is that Banksy, for whatever reasons known probably only to him, he decided to, within the frame of this painting, he actually created a paper shredder. he built in a paper shredder that was hidden. He was the only one that knew it was within this frame, within this piece of artwork, where by remote control, at any point he could hit a button, and all of a sudden the picture would start to go through a shredder. And in fact, actually, what's cool about this is actually he caught this on camera the very moment he hit the button. In fact, we got a little video of this. Take a look.
860,000. Fair warning, I set it down at 860,000. Last chance, Bastien will be bidding and sell it for 860,000.
Like, you're planning for maybe a potential attack, you're prepared for a potential attack out there. You know, somebody, come with this, can of spray paint or whatever the case is. You're not planning for the attack to actually come within the piece of artwork itself. And look, I share that with you because what I want you to know is it doesn't matter what kind of fences we have in our life when it comes to our struggles and challenges in life to protect ourselves from the enemy out there or the enemies out there if we don't have the proper security to protect us from the enemy within. So that's where we're going with this series. We're talking about how do we win this war within, to which I think the Bible has a lot to say in relation to this. And specifically starting with the very focal point that we're going to key on today, which is if we're going to win the battle inside, you've got to know it's going to take some heart. It's going to take some heart. In fact, interesting enough, when it comes to really making progress in gaining victory, when it comes to this struggle, these struggles, these challenges, these wrestling matches internally, the Bible oftentimes starts with the heart. In fact, Proverbs 4:23 puts it this way. It says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. In fact, you can probably put this another way, which is that nothing great has ever been done with half of someone's heart. I mean, think about it. Nothing great. When you look at anyone who's ever done anything in life, nothing great has ever been done historically, but with a half-hearted effort or by someone whose heart isn't really in it. In fact, a good example of this is my Sooners losing today to Kansas State. You can tell going into the game their heart was just not in it. And in fact, in the book, I Declare War, it's interesting, he shares a story that kind of speaks to this about Theodore Roosevelt. And Theodore Roosevelt, of course, an amazing president, but he, when he's in his biography, when he's actually talking about his life, he states the defining moment in his life actually came in a specific battle. It was a battle that happened in Cuba, the Battle of San Juan Hill. And it was a moment where he and his troops were basically pinned down. There was a fortified structure up above them, and as a result, they were pinned down at the bottom of this hill. They couldn't move, they couldn't progress, they couldn't go forward, they couldn't go backwards. And there was this moment. There was this moment in Theodore Roosevelt's life where, as he describes it, he goes, I don't know what it was, but he said a wolf. It was like a wolf grew in my heart. A wolf grew in my heart, and as a result, he kind of found this courage and found this passion and found this will to fight it. So much so, he jumps on a horse, leads the charge with his troops in hand to take this battlefront, to take this hill. And he again describes as one of the greatest moments in his life, one of the most defining moments in his life. And I love that statement where he says, it was like a wolf grew in my heart. Again, what's he talking about here? He's describing this will to fight. He's describing this passion. He's describing this fire, this angst sort of rising up within him. He's describing his heart. And listen, I share that with you because just like in his life and just like in our lives, we will hope to get victory in these internal struggles, these internal fights within. Listen, you got to know it's going to take heart. It's going to take heart because, again, nothing great has ever been done with half of someone's heart. And the truth is, I believe the greatest fight that you and I will ever face is that battle within. It's those struggles, it's those addictions, it's that depression, it's those internal struggles and battles where for many of us it can kind of feel like we're even losing the battle at points. Because maybe our heart's not really in it. We're trying to get victory in these areas in our life with sort of half-hearted ways. We're trying to find deliverance with a half-hearted attitude. We're trying to live out this life in Christ with a half-hearted approach. And as a result, for a lot of us, if we're really honest, when it comes to our faith, maybe it can sometimes just kind of feel like we're at a place where we just find ourselves kind of going through the motions. Where the passion for the things of God maybe aren't what they used to be. Or maybe my excitement and my joy and my love for life, maybe even for God, just doesn't feel like it is now where it maybe used to be. In fact, in Mark 4, Jesus, I think he kind of speaks to this a little bit. And it speaks to and gives us some insight of how, when it comes to growing a heart, in some cases getting our heart back again for God, for the things of God, this heart for the fight itself. And I like how he kind of speaks to this in Mark chapter 4, verses 26 to 29. He says, this is what the kingdom of God is like. It says, a man scatters seed on the ground night and day, whether he sleeps or gets up, the seed sprouts and grows, though he does not know how. All by itself the soil produces grain, first the stalk, then the head, then full kernel in the head. As soon as the grain is ripe, he puts the sickle to it because the harvest has come. I love those words in verse 28. It says, all by itself, the soil produces grain. All by itself. Holly and I, we took Austin to the pumpkin patch a couple days ago. And I remember just walking around the store, and I came across these snack-sized bags of pumpkin seeds. And pumpkin seeds, apparently, like, and on the advertisement, it's just like all this nutritional value stuff. Like, apparently, like, pumpkin seeds are good for you to eat. And one of the things it advertises is advertises high in protein, which was kind of news to me. Now, horticulturalists out there, or gone through biology 101, you might be like, this is not anything new for me. But it was new to me, because I always thought if you were going to digest protein, you would eat things that other things ate. Like I never really thought of like getting my protein fix from seeds, but apparently like pumpkin seeds and most seeds, all seeds have a little bit of protein in them. Like they're created, when they're designed, when God formed these seeds, there's a little bit of protein within every one of them. So that way, when they first get put into the ground, there's just enough protein to start the growth process, to get it to the point where photosynthesis can begin to take over. And here's what I'm trying to tell you. Here's why I bring that up, is that especially those of you who come in here, you feel like you're lacking some heart. You feel like you're lacking some passion. Maybe you used to have when it comes to the things of God. And that's, listen, your passion, your love, that fire you once had, you need to know it's not dead, it's just dormant. It's not dead, it's just dormant. You might have thought, oh, I'll never see that again, but inside of you, it's always been inside of you. The fire is still inside of you. In fact, I like how the words, the advice Paul gives to Timothy, he's like, when he's speaking of this, he's like, you need to fan in the flame. You need to fan in the flame those promises of God, that life, that love, that heart he has for you. You've got to fan that into flame. And listen, I came to tell some of you tonight, listen, you need to know the ambition. It's still inside you. That the energy is still inside you. The excitement is still inside of you. It might be hard to see. You might come in here and feel so tired and so worn out. I just have a hard time seeing it, preacher, but I'm telling you, it's in there. The hope is still inside of you. The purpose is still inside of you. The passion is still inside of you. The joy is still inside of you. The dream is still inside of you. The faith you so desperately need is still inside of you. Just need some stirring. As Paul would say, just need some fanning in their flame again to be drawn out. Which leads to the question, well, how do I do that? How do I do that? When I feel like, forget guarding the heart, I feel like there's no heart left there. Like, I feel like the passion's gone. I feel like the excitement's gone. I feel dry. What do you do with that? Well, check out verse 28. I love this. It says again, all by itself, check this out, the soil produces grain. First the stalk, then the head, then the full kernel in the head. But check this out, all by itself, the soil produces grain. See, I think for many of us, oftentimes when we go through kind of those drought seasons, when it comes to the things of God, and when it comes even to our relationship with God, I think so many times we sort of ask the wrong question. We tend to ask what's missing. Like what's missing? When we're going through those seasons where we just feel passionless, we just don't feel like there's any joy, there's any love when it comes to life, we tend to ask that question, what is missing? And we think, if I just get the job, if I get the car, if I get the better situation, move to a better place, then maybe I can kind of fan that flame back in the process. But I love this passage because where it really speaks to us, and the good news within this is again this reminder that you have everything you need, everything you ever needed, God already put inside of you. You're not missing a thing. So as a result, the real question we ought to be asking is not what am I missing, but where am I planted? Where am I planted? Because where you're planted will determine what you produce. If you plant in good soil, you'll produce. If you're planting in bad soil, you're not going to produce anything. Or at least the things you produce aren't going to be the things you want. See, the real question when we're going through the seasons and we're like, man, I feel like I'm just lacking on passion. I feel like I'm lacking in joy. I feel like I'm lacking in just that sense of life and energy and vitality. Listen, it's not what are you missing. It's where you're planted. Because listen, if where you're planted, if where you're drawing strength from, if where you're drawing significance from is anything other than this relationship with Jesus, I'm telling you that soil will fail every single time. And in fact, I love how it speaks this Colossians 2, 6-7. It says, so then, just as you receive Christ Jesus as Lord, continue to live your lives in Him, rooted and built up in Him, strengthened in the faith as you were taught, and overflowing with thankfulness. I love that. Let your roots go down to Him. Let your lives be built on Him. In other words, God said, when I made you, I put everything you needed inside of you. And because I put it inside of you, I'm the only one that can get it out of you. And listen, this brings us to, if you like to sleep during my messages, that's cool. You can go back to sleep right after this. But if I had to summarize this whole message in one statement, this is really a statement that actually in a lot of ways really convicted me this past week. It's simply this, is that when you really think about this and really look at it, what you come to discover is this truth and reality that the Scripture really lays out is that, listen, you will never enjoy life if you can't learn to enjoy God. You will never enjoy life if you can't learn to enjoy God. Okay, you can go back to sleep now. But you got to hold on to that. That's so key. And listen, when I'm talking about enjoy, so often, oftentimes when I work on a message, it's trying to gear towards the person who's brand new to faith or is on the fence of faith. But really, tonight, I want to speak to those of you who've been at this for some time. And so when I say enjoy it, I'm talking about more than just serving Him. I'm talking about more than just showing up, a few more times, a few more Saturdays in the month. I'm talking about really, truly enjoying Him and learning what it is to enjoy this relationship with Jesus. In fact, I like how Jeremiah 17, 7-8 speaks of this. When we learn to again get our joy, get our strength from this relationship with Him. It says, but blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in Him. They will be like a tree planted by the water, that sends out its roots by the stream. It does not fear when He comes. Its leaves are always green. I love that. It has no worries in a year of drought and never fails to bear fruit. I love that. Listen, again, you don't have to be a horticulturist. You don't have to be an expert gardener to know that every plant, it needs water. It needs water to survive. It's dependent somewhat on external circumstances. And yet when you look at our lives and kind of correlation to our lives, how many of us kind of live our lives with the same approach? If finances are going well, then you've got joy, you've got passion. If you just got that promotion, you've got joy, you've got passion. If the church is going great, I got joy, I got passion. If you're healthy, you've got joy, you've got passion. If your kid's got 2 arms, 2 legs, you've got joy, you've got passion. But here's the problem with that whole formula, is what happens when seasons change? What happens when seasons of drought? What happens during seasons without rain? I remember some time ago I was hanging out with some pastors, pastor friends of mine, and in the conversation, when the question came up, how do you avoid burnout? And I don't, normally I've got a pretty good filter on my mouth, but for some reason it just kind of it came out when he asked it to me, and I said, you don't. You don't, because I went on to share with them sort of my story when it comes to ministry and just living, honestly, just living life and living out this relationship with Christ. And I told him, look, if I couldn't even count how many times I've gone through seasons of burnout. Well, like, it's not a question of, all right, can you avoid burnout? It's not a question of if it'll happen, whether you're a pastor, whether you're just a follower of Christ, a man, a woman of God. Now, listen, I'm telling you, we're all going to go through seasons. I don't care how strong you are in the faith, seasons of burnout, seasons where you feel like you're walking through a drought, where you're walking through a dry desert, and you're like, God, what's going on? Where you feel like you're lacking that passion, you feel like you're lacking that joy. See, the question is not if. The question is, though, is what do you do when you go through it? What do you do when you go through it? Because again, I found when it comes in those seasons, oftentimes if I'm really honest with myself, typically when I'm going through those seasons, my natural tendency is to again focus on what I'm missing. Focus on what's missing when it comes to a church. Focus on what's missing when it comes to my life. Focus on what's missing when it comes to the stuff we have or don't have. We get focused on what we're missing. And yet I've discovered time and time again, that listen, when I begin to get out of it and come out of those seasons of burnout, those seasons of drought, is when I shift my focus from what's missing to, again, where I'm planted. Because when I learn to focus again on planting myself, getting back to that relationship with Jesus Christ, getting rooted in His love and His heart, and His love and acceptance of me, not pastor me, not minister me, but just me. But like when I learn to focus in on that relationship, spending time with Him, being reminded of His promises, being reminded of His heart, being reminded of His love for me, it's amazing how suddenly I start to find strength again, I start to find joy again, I start to find passion again. It's not about what you're missing, it's where you're planted. Where are you planted? Where are you planted? My wife, some time ago, she had these plants served in our kind of front yard area that were slowly dying. And, and I remember normally she just kind of accepts defeat, but for some reason with these plants, she really wanted to see them come back to life. And so it kind of became her mission to bring people to Jesus and bring these plants back to life. That was like her mission. And as she did, I found it interesting, these brown leaves started to turn green again. And again, when you go back to what Jeremiah says, see, the reason he points out green is because green, it's that sign of vigor, it's that sign of passion, it's that sign of life again. And I love that. It's this reminder that, listen, when you and I learn to shift our focus from what's missing to where am I planted, when we get back to putting our roots down, this relationship with Jesus Christ, that we spend time being reminded again of His promises, His love for you and I, just us, not for what we do, not for what we accomplish, not for what we do, but we just are reminded about His heart for us. It's amazing how suddenly life starts to come back into our bones. And interesting enough, it's not just speaking in terms of our spiritual life, but also just life in general, that when I put my roots in that relationship with Him, it's amazing how it changes even my perspective of my job, changes my perspective of my relationship. It changes my perspective of just life in general. I start to find joy, I start to find passion, and you start to find vitality again. Point is that the resurgence of your personal passion will only happen when you plant yourself in God's presence, in God's heart, in God's love for you. And this is the challenge. And listen, this is why, because tendency, like when we hear this, and again, this is key that you get this, because I really do believe this. I think that before you lose love for your family, you tend to lose love for God. Before you lose love for your spouse, you will lose love for God. Before you lose love for ministry, you will lose love for God. Before you lose love for life, you will lose love for God. And that's why the Bible's so particular. Guard your heart. Protect your heart. Because out of that, the life, the joy, the passion, the vitality we so hunger and we so desire, we're so dependent on, flows out of that. And this is the challenge of us. How do I get that? How do I really do that? How do I take heart? Because if you're anything like me, oftentimes in moments like this, it's like we want a checklist. I don't know how those of you who operate with lives without checklists operate or function or even survive a day. But like for me to actually make any progress on anything, I have to have a checklist. You know, I got checklists. I got like multiple checklist apps on my phone. Actually, some of my challenge is actually looking at the checklist throughout the day. But I got checklist after checklist, and tendency when we talk about taking heart and growing your heart and getting planted again in this relationship with Christ, the tendency is to kind of want a checklist. All right, Pastor, just tell me the things I got to do or the things not to do. Tell me 3 things to do, 3 things don't do. But the challenge is when we're talking about, love, falling in love, or in some cases, for some of us the first time, some cases again, when it comes to falling in love with God, listen, it doesn't work by checklist. In fact, I remember speaking of burnout, and again, I've gone through so many seasons of burnout, I can't even keep count of it. In fact, I still remember a season where I went through burnout even before I ever even got into the ministry. And I remember it was a time, early college years in Oklahoma, and I remember going to my pastor, and I was like, I need some advice. Because of that passion that I once had, that desire I once had for the things of God, for even this relationship with God, this call that God has on my life, it doesn't feel like it's where it used to be. And so his advice to me was great advice. He said, well, you need to pray more. You need to pray more. And then that doesn't work. You need to read your Bible more. Then you need to fast more. And that doesn't work. You need to go to church more. And again, great advice. And listen, advice that man, I took to a T, and it helped. It definitely helped. But even at the end of the day, even after all of that, all the stuff I did, I still felt this sense of where my passion level just wasn't where it used to be when it came to my relationship with God. Because the reality is listen, you got to understand something. Just through sheer effort, you can't make this happen. It's sheer effort of just doing more stuff. I'm telling you, when it comes to growing that passion level, that heart again for the things of God and even God himself, it's not going to happen just by sheer effort of doing things. In fact, Jesus speaks of this, Matthew 7:22 through 23. He says, many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons, and in your name perform many miracles? And then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. In other words, he's saying, look, they're doing all the things, but they missed it. Because it's not about things, it's about knowing me. And sometimes let's be honest, we can get so caught up in doing the things that we can forget that while the things are important, the things are not the main thing. The main thing is Jesus. And knowing him and having a growing, thriving relationship with him. So I went back to my pastor. I said, I did the things. I still feel like there's something missing. So he's like, well, maybe there's some things you need to stop doing. Maybe you need to stop the chewing tobacco. Maybe you need to stop, cut out some of the movies, some of the things that you're watching. Maybe you need to cut out some of the addiction, some of the sin in your life. And so I did that. So I went on this process of purging, and again, it helped, but still, even after that, that passion, that heart I was so longing for again to return, it just didn't seem like it was there. In fact, Jesus, interesting enough in speaking towards this, shares a very similar story as the first one in Matthew 25, verses 1 through 12. We don't have time to read through that whole story. I'll just kind of give you the quick Cliff Notes version of it. But he shares a story of 10 bridesmaids. Of course, they're not called bridesmaids. In the story, they're called virgins, and that's significant because they were known for, in the story, they were known for what they didn't do. It was symbolic of purity. They were living life the right way in terms of kind of what he was trying to get at here. And of course, as the story goes on, it's interesting. You go 5 of these, or basically these 10 bridesmaids are all waiting for the bridegroom to come and basically usher them into the wedding party. And so 5 of them actually fall asleep. And when they fall asleep, and when they wake up, they realize the oil they had in their lamps to kind of light the way so the bridegroom knew they were waiting on him had run out. So they headed to the quickest, nearest to Ray's and tried to get some oil. I don't know where they went to get the oil, but they went there. When they came back, they realized the other 5 had already, the bridegroom had already come, and the other 5 had went with him and were already at the wedding party. And so they show up, knock on the door, and again, very similar to the very first story, it's interesting the response given to them. He said, the others came, verse 11 of that story says, Lord, Lord, they said, open the door first. But he replied, truly I tell you, I don't know you. I don't know you. By the way, interesting enough too on that little story is that I remember in doing a little bit of research on it, I was trying to find the significance of the oil and the lamps. But what's interesting in the context of like a wedding ceremony is that the oil was never actually needed. It wasn't required. It just wasn't a requirement. In fact, nowhere in Jewish wedding tradition do you see this requirement of having oil and having this lamp. And yet, the reality is that if you really look at it and look at the story in its context, what you come to discover is some ladies that were more concerned with their appearance than their attendance. In other words, it's like what God's trying to get across to us, I think, in this story is, hey, look, the oil's good. The oil's important, but don't miss the wedding. It's all about the wedding. It's all about this relationship. Listen, I appreciate you feeding the homeless. I appreciate you doing big things, great things. I appreciate you trying to do the right thing, doing all these good things. But don't forget me. It's all about me. Now again, as I've said before, all those things are important. Are they important? Yes. Not sinning is important. Doing good things is important. Making a kingdom impact is important. My argument is not that they're not important. My argument is that we had the formula backwards. You don't do good things and avoid bad things to love God. No, it's because God loves you. You find yourself doing good things and avoiding bad things. You find yourself doing significant things and finding freedom from self-sabotaging things in your life. When you start to put your roots down on the depths and the reality of His heart and His love for us. You see, so often I think we get the order wrong, forgetting that it all starts with the heart, especially when it comes to getting our passion back, our joy back, our fight back, when it comes to God and the things of God. But listen, your relationship, and we'll wrap up with this, is not like the great American movie starring Matthew McConaughey, Jennifer Lopez, The Wedding Planner. If you've seen that movie, there's one scene in particular where J-Lo's parents are trying to convince her to marry this guy she doesn't really know. And so she comes back, I don't know him, I don't know him. And her father says, look, you will learn to love him. You'll serve him, you'll make him dinner, you'll wash his clothes, and one day you'll wake up and you'll love him. But listen, the reality is, that's not what God's looking for from you. He's not looking for your obedience and then that growing into a heart of love. Like if you just work hard, do more things, stop doing this, start doing that, and then eventually some point in time you'll wake up and love. That's not what he's going to. No, listen, when God speaks of His heart for you, what we're trying to get at is it's less like The Wedding Planner and more like another great American movie classic starring Ryan Gosling, The Notebook. The Notebook. And I don't know if you've seen this movie, but spoiler alert, it basically kind of begins and ends with this old married couple, and the husband, he's visiting his wife at a retirement home, but she is suffering from dementia, doesn't remember who he is. And so he shows up and he just starts telling her a story. Starts telling her this love story between this couple. And as he's sharing the stories, he's sharing these moments, as he's sharing these encounters, there's all of a sudden there's this moment of realization in her life where she goes, that's me. That's me. You're Noah, and what's her name? Allie, I think it is. Yes, that's me. There's this moment of realization. And listen, you need to grab this. Because, listen, this is what the gospel does in your life. That this is how we fall in love, in some cases fall back in love with Jesus and get our roots down into the very heart of his love and his heart for us. Is when we hear the story of this amazing, amazing person named Jesus. We're reminded of a love that's not once upon a lifetime kind of love, but it's this kind of love that would lead to a cross. That would lead to a place where he didn't just tell us how much he loved us, but he showed it to us on that cross. Leaving divine rights of heaven to come down here on earth on this rescue mission, not simply for the world at large, not just for your neighbor, not just for your coworker, not just for that person who looks like they got their act all together, but he came on a rescue mission for you. And there's a moment you want to start to grow your heart and get your heart back. Get your fight back. Get your passion back. Listen, I'm telling you, it's when you rediscover the story. Listen, it's when you hear God's love for us, that there's something about that our love for him begins to wake up. That the more you're reminded of the reality of his heart for you, his love for you, the distance he was willing to go for you, the price he paid for you, how can your heart not begin to grow and not begin to expand for the things of God and even God himself? 1 John 4, 9 through 10 puts it this way. It said, this is how God showed his love among us. He sent his one and only Son into the world that we might live through him. This is love. Not that we love God, but that he loved us and sent his Son as an atoning sacrifice for our sins. See, rediscovering a heart for the things of God begins with rediscovering God's heart for you. This reality that, he loves me. He loves you. When you think of this stuff, you think of it. You know what's interesting back on that Banksy painting is that when it actually did get sold, in its brokenness and its shredded tatters, it actually sold again for twice the amount it was originally sold for. And listen, I think that's when God looks at you, that's what he sees. He doesn't see brokenness. He doesn't see just a bunch of tears and tatters. What he sees is a child. What he sees is a son. What he sees is a daughter. What he sees is someone that he loves so much. He was willing to go any distance for, just to simply be in relationship with you. Because he just loves you, not because of what you do or don't do, just because of who you are in him. I'm going to ask the worship team to come up. I share this story when Holly and I kind of first really met, where I guess it was kind of a moment of realization that I got a chance with her. And I share it once a year, so eventually, if you stick around here long enough, you're going to be better telling my story of how Holly and I met better than me. But I remember I was looking at our dorm room. We went to the same Bible college together, and I remember I knew Holly was way out of my league. But I remember there was a moment where I was looking out the dorm room window, and I remember she was walking by with this guy hand in hand, who he was a nice guy, but he wasn't like the brightest guy in the world, And I just kind of looked down like really him? But then there was like this moment of realization, like if she could choose him, that means I've got a chance, right? And listen, I've always wondered, why does God always use imperfect people to reveal his perfect plan? I think more than anything, it's just to show to an unbelieving world, listen, you got a chance. I don't care what you've been through, what you've done, what you've gone through, the story of your life, the brokenness, the tears, the tatters. Listen, because of his work on the cross, you've got a chance. You've got a chance. But part of that story I don't always share is actually the moment where we're like, I knew I was really in love with her. Because this actually happened years later. Holly, she was at Brownsville Revival School, and she already graduated. I was, unlike me, a 7-year college student, and not because I was doing graduate work. She actually did the right thing, graduated on time, and she went on to this music school in Florida. And I remember just on the phone, we were having a conversation one day, and because we were friends, but again, I think there was still that element of like, yeah, I've got a chance, but there was still that doubt of like seeing her as like I could see her, receiving me as a friend, but actually like seeing me as a potential like D1. That was a whole other worldly. And anyway, I remember having this conversation on the phone, and there was this moment where we were just talking, and there was this realization where we were talking about her maybe potentially kind of coming back and actually starting to date, like actually formally date, because up to this point we've just been friends. And it's like it hit me, like oh my goodness, like not only do I want her, but like she wants me. And it's amazing, like that moment, that realization that someone like her could want someone like me. It's like my heart grew, passion grew, joy grew, excitement grew. And listen, that's what the gospel's all about. You want to get your heart back. It's in hearing God remind you, listen, I love you, just for you. Just putting roots back down, getting back to this relationship with Jesus. It's not about the stuff you do or don't do. It's just being with Him, being in this relationship, and being reminded of His incredible heart and love for you. I want to pray for you before we jump into worship. And I want to pray for, first off, for those of you who maybe you've never experienced that love before. Again, when you look at your life, you can identify very much to the Banksy painting with all of its shreds and all of its tatters. And you look at it and you're like, I don't see how anyone could see any value in that. When I think of what I've done, I think maybe what I didn't do that I thought I was going to do. But listen, the gospel message, the entire Bible is a love story. It's this message of a God who says, no, I don't care how maybe what others have said about you, or maybe even what others think about you. I know what I think about you. I know what I say about you. What I say about you is I love you. You are chosen. You are beautiful. You've got significance. You've got value simply as a creation, as a child of God. And listen, if you ever doubt that, all you got to do is look at the cross. He loves you. Not for what you can do for Him or achieve for Him. He loves you because He just simply wants to be in a relationship with you. And so if that's you, if you've never asked Jesus into your life, or maybe it's been a long time for you, I want to give you that opportunity tonight. And so if that's you, just simply pray this prayer with me in your heart. Father, I acknowledge that I make more than a few mistakes. I've slipped up more than a few times. And yet I believe in this incredible love story known as the gospel. That you love me enough to come down on this rescue mission, to pay a price for all of my sin and all of my shame, past, present, future. To just simply say, I love you. Do you want to be in relationship with me? Not because of anything I can do for you or achieve for you, but just because you want to be with me. And so now, Jesus, I ask you to come into my life and to be Lord and Savior of my life. There's others of you in here. You come in here and you've been walking with Jesus for a long time. But if you're honest, you're kind of going through a drought season. It feels like it's just kind of going through the motions. And that's my prayer for you tonight, is that as we worship our God one more time, is that in the midst of the song, in the midst of the words, that you would pause long enough to hear that still small whisper of God remind you of